Hey guys, and welcome back to the Nurse on Purpose podcast. Today, we are stepping into a conversation that touches real lives in real time. My guest, who is not a nurse, but is absolutely a champion for those that we care for, is Anne Wintemute, the co-founder and CEO of Amy Says, an AI companion built for survivors of domestic violence. Domestic violence affects millions around the world every day and takes many forms, all of which we will explore together today. In about 2 years, Amy Says has supported nearly 40,000 people seeking clarity, safety, and guidance, whether they're noticing the first red flag or facing the hardest moments of leaving. Anne is a fierce advocate for survivors and children, and a reformer committed to holding perpetrators accountable. She brings that same courage and creativity into domestic violence advocacy, reminding us, especially in nursing, that while we care for survivors daily, nurses themselves face some of the highest rates of violence, with more than 80% experiencing workplace aggression each year. Anne's mission is to close the dangerous gaps in support and offer survivors a tool that treats their experience with dignity. Today we'll explore her journey, the realities of abuse in clinical spaces, and the hope that she's helping build for the future. It is such a pleasure to have you on with me today, Anne. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, my pleasure. I am now breaking into interviewing non-nurses, and it's so exciting, the kind of people that have kind of reached out to me or I've reached out to have on my podcast. First, I had like a fashion stylist, right? Which is my first non-nurse. Well, I had a physician, but somebody that was completely out of the healthcare space was a fashion stylist. And we kind of talked about how nurses could dress for success, and scrubs don't have to be frumpy, and how you present yourself can really elevate your mood, right? So all of these things kind of tie in. So I'm really excited to be talking about this today, especially such a sensitive topic that affects many people. And I think it's even underreported, if you ask me. It's severely underreported because domestic violence, domestic abuse can carry with it such a weight of shame, guilt, and just feeling like there's something that you could have done to remedy the situation. And so I'm truly excited that you can bring this topic and shed some light on what people face every day, both men and women. Okay, so let's talk, right? Before the micro school leadership, which I do want you to mention because I didn't say that in my intro. Before advocacy, who were you? What experiences shaped the way that you kind of see safety, dignity, protection? Who is Anne Wintemute?
I love that question, and I have to dig back. I'm a farm girl. I'm a farm girl from Southern Oregon who spent every day after school on an ATV riding amongst our herds of beef cattle.
I love that.
Yes, and sheep and riding horses. And, this question kind of teases out, like, what was your autonomy? Like, what is your perspective on freedom? What does it mean as a human being to have agency and freedom? And I very much cut my teeth on that, living, across 360 acres, very much stewarding that space, understanding the care relationship that happens, right, between animals and plants and humans, and having a lot of agency and autonomy and responsibility. So that kind of concept of like, how did I cut my teeth on who I am was in a very cyclical, seasonal, relational space where the systems there very much relied on each other for health.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned kind of being in this, well, I would call it like rural agrarian setting. Are you still in that space? Are you a city girl now?
You'll love this. So I am a city girl. I live in urban Denver, but I call myself an urban homesteader. So out the window right there are goats.
Yeah.
I've got chickens, rabbits, we mow our lawn with a herd of guinea pigs because we
Yeah.
can't have cattle in the city.
Yeah.
So no, I very much have brought that
Mm.
that rural agrarian seasonal life as close to the city as possible.
That's amazing. And there's something like a freedom that comes from that. It just has a certain sense of like being wild and young and free, because I kind of live in a country setting in that way. And there's something so special about it. Now, how do we go from that little girl who grew up in that way to being what you are today, building a micro school, building something for domestic abuse survivors? What was that moment that shifted for you that led you to say, I have to build something for survivors of domestic abuse?
Gosh, well, I bet you're right that it did kind of birth itself in that childhood, and in that, we had to create systems that worked. Right? There was no one was going to come and, save the cow, the cow that was struggling in birth. Like, we had to create systems that work. And as I aged, like, holy cow, there's a whole lot of systems, especially ones that are supposed to benefit, that say they benefit women and children, that don't work. That don't work as they suggest that they do. So, early on for me, that was working in evidence-based maternity care, right? Like, why do things look in the United States the way they do relative to the research? Then it was in childhood education. Wow, elementary schools actually look a lot different than what they would look like if we built them based on research. Then, these are all kind of systems that struggle to meet the needs of women and children. And in the space of domestic violence, I think there's no greater example of systems and communities struggling to meet the needs of those people than domestic violence.
Yeah. Now, you said that our elementary school systems would look a lot different if they were based on research. Can you expand on that? What sort of research are you referring to?
Well, if we back out and think, who is the kind of the end user? Who is the person who's supposed to benefit from this system? Presumably, if we're talking about education, it's the child. The child is the person who should benefit from this system. But if you actually take a look at the systems, policies, the types of testing, the ways that teachers are evaluated, it's really difficult to continue to make the case that the child is supposed to be the one that benefits. It's much easier to kind of, even just looking at it optically, not even having to dig into the research to back it up, it's much easier to make the case that the system's actually serving someone else, right? It's serving the burden of the local district, or it's serving the purse strings, and we have to perform or demonstrate this type of thing just to get funding next year, or at a federal level, right? The system is designed to be able to demonstrate to other countries that we're leaders in, academic achievement. The further and further we get away from, frankly, a little kid who needs to sit on someone's lap and have their feelings tended to, right? That would be serving perhaps the need of that child at that moment. And the more we get to serving someone else, really to the detriment of the child. So that was what I was attempting to address when I started an elementary school about 10 years ago.
Yeah. And when you kind of based your elementary school and the foundation and the principles of it on these research, what were the outcomes that you were seeing in your students?
Yeah, so we talked about, education should be at human scale, such that each individual child could kind of see the trajectory of their education, see its scope. Where are we going? Where have we been? Like, the scale should be such that it is accessible to the person who is benefiting from it. And one of those ways is the size of the school.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
At a large school, one child does not know every other child. So making it reflect more of the kind of extended family size dynamic. It means giving some kind of agency and choice over how a specific skill is demonstrated, because kids are all different, right? So if we ask every child to fly and demonstrate their ability to fly, the kids who can't fly but swim really well will fail. Even though, we should be valuing that ability to swim as well. So it's really just kind of bringing things back to the scale of the child, the individuality of the child, recognizing those social and emotional needs, and kind of de-stressing, if you will, even the school atmosphere, so that really great learning is possible.
Yeah. I was watching something recently. It was about a Japanese school structure and how this was specifically about their nutrition, and how they are fed. and how their nutrition is such a key and a vital part of their daily activity and experiences, is that they teach them exactly what's on their plate, what their nutrients are, how they tie in together to make a balanced meal. They hire a nutritionist who has been trained for 3 years in food and nutrition. And that's who prepares the meals. The meals are prepared fresh every day. I would say has such a great impact on even just their well-being, right? Because whatever you put in your body reflects on the outside. And we talk about emotional health and emotional well-being for children. And that's why there's a lot of people who push for homeschooling, because they are like, the public school systems have not done our children the kind of service that we would do if we were home. Can you speak to how the entire experience of schooling, emotionally, physically, even the nutrition, ties into build up a whole and a complete child?
Gosh, this is a whole podcast of its own for sure. But I'll hone in on the nutrition one. So you're absolutely right. Like you've seen those videos where they show like, here's the lunch plate in all of these different countries. And one of them really stands out, and that's the lunch plate in the United States. Eating is a deeply social, deeply human experience, which many cultures represent in their education spaces, right? Lunch is still carved out. There's a great deal of time and thought and intention put into it. Children have time to eat. In the United States, I think we see this more as a basic nutritional equation. Have we provided the kind of caloric intake to stave off starvation? And I say that with a little bit of a chuckle in my voice. But again, if you take a step back and look, okay, what is the visible purpose? The lunchroom in an elementary, middle or high school in the United States, its visible purpose is not to create social bonds, is not to improve people's, health and relationship with food. It's to get them fed as cost effectively as possible and as quickly as possible, and onto what schools value, like test scores. And those kinds of decisions, those trade-offs, right? We traded one thing off in order to achieve something else, really tear away the foundation of the kind of safety, security, dignity, humanity that allows for the best types of learning. It creates higher stress environments. Stress and learning are, are oil and water. They don't go together. Yeah. So I'll use that one example to try to answer the big question that you asked.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So let's talk about Amy Says. Let's move on to sort of how you founded that and what Amy Says, what the platform is in detail, and what kind of impact have you seen over the years?
I saw this kind of concern that I had young children in this education space, and so I built this school. During my work there, started to realize the impact of family violence, of domestic violence on families, and the failures of the system to essentially do kind of what they promised to do, right? We say like, hey, if you're in an unhealthy relationship, or certainly a violent one, you need to end that relationship. The abuse will stop. The systems will protect you. I saw very much firsthand that was not the case. And kind of, all right, well, I go back to my roots. Like, how do I solve this problem? It's on the table in front of me. What do I need to know? What do I need to research? And what I found was there are crisis services, right? There are crisis services. They're highly stigmatized, really difficult for people to go and utilize those services. At that point, kind of their needs are so acute and so heightened that a vast amount of damage has already occurred. And then we really fail to have anything in the ecosystem between red flag and rock bottom, right? So Amy, and then generative AI comes out, and I've been working with survivors at that point for years. Generative AI comes out, and I thought, well, and my co-founder, Stephen Nichols, can AI, if we build it right, if we build it safe, if we train it in the right ways, if we give it a unique set of tools that reflect the needs of survivors, can we create an ecosystem of support that prevents the type of escalation and violence that lands someone in a domestic violence shelter? Because I can tell you, there's been years of issues prior to that moment, sometimes literally decades, right? A huge swath of opportunity for intervention. Can we change the trajectory of harm? Can we shorten those relationships? Can we empower survivors? And then post-crisis, like I said before, that, if you leave, the system will protect your children, it'll protect you. That is a lie that we tell people because we want to believe that it's true. The truth is that the system fails to do the most basic thing that survivors need, and that's to believe them.
Yeah.
So Amy is helping them tell their story in a way that people will believe them so they can get the help they need.
Somebody who is in a domestic abuse setting situation, they go into Amy Says. What do they expect to find? What do they expect to achieve? Walk me step by step through that.
Yeah. So we have folks who, and I'll back up. We don't read what people say to Amy. We're not reading it or what Amy says back to them. You guys do have confidentiality.
So it's like a chat. It's a chat platform between
yes,
user
it is a
and
kind of chat centric, I'll say, platform. Because we want folks to be able to show up as they are. So if someone goes to amysays.com, Amy greets them. Hi, my name is Amy. These are the things that I'm able to do. What's on your mind today? And folks talk everything from I went on a weird Bumble date, or this text message that he sent was weird, up to, I've been trying to divorce this abusive person for 2 years and he's managed to convince the courts that I'm actually the abusive party, whatever, right? And we'll call that one rock bottom. Start a conversation. Now, we want people to be able to show up in that way that doesn't demand extra of them, that's led by them, that's chosen by them. But we're doing a whole lot of work in the background. So in the background, we're labeling, tagging, timelining that information. And, when we talk about the digital health tool, right? And, we think that shockingly, in a massive market anomaly, one digital health tool has been left off of the table, and that's one that addresses domestic violence. We are giving people, we're using our expertise, which has been engineered and is now being administered by AI, to give people access to their data in ways that are helpful and clarifying and can be shared with, other, for example, systems, courts, police officers, their doctor, nurse, etc., in ways that help them get the resources and support that they need.
So Amy Says is not replacing your therapist. It's not replacing counselors, but it's giving them a tool to kind of walk them through what steps they need to take from point A to point B or whatever other point they're going. It helps them to know, okay, this is who you need to contact. This is, you can keep this transcript as a legal record, correct? For the courts and the system.
So Amy's output isn't legal evidence, right? It's not admissible. You can't cross-examine Amy. But what she's doing is she's taking the information that you have shared and is essentially plotting it, right? Or making it possible to recall it. So you come, you have a conversation, you create an account, you have a conversation, you have 5 more. Amy's extracting information. She's putting on a timeline. Here was a physical abuse incident. Here's an example of stalking. Here's, proportionally, there's X number of these types of incidents in these bubble charts, right? And Y number of these types. And then you said, Amy, I need a protection order. Or Amy, I need, what information do I take to a lawyer? I need to file for divorce. And she will automatically pull in from every chat you've had, anything that's relevant, the timelines, the documents that you've uploaded, and instantly create a binder, for example. So people can show up, just talk, and have all of that work done on their behalf in the back end. And you brought up therapists. Therapists treat mental health issues. Domestic violence can cause mental health issues, can and does, but domestic violence is not a mental health issue. And therapists are not trained in identifying, addressing, or treating, because it's not a mental health issue, domestic violence. So it very much works in kind of synergy with a mental health provider if you have one.
And what kind of professionals have trained Amy in the way to kind of respond to the users?
Yeah, so we have an incredible list of advisors from law enforcement, from the healthcare community, the legal communities, lots of attorneys, mental health community. But Amy is trained on a data set that is not dissimilar from the data that those professions would be trained on. And certainly, most importantly, domestic violence advocacy, which is very much its own specialized field. This particular space is full of myth and stigma that prevents, kind of curiosity and discovery about it, and certainly prevents people from coming to the correct conclusions. So she's trained in kind of that background and knowledge primarily.
Awesome. That's wonderful. Now, I know that Amy has supported nearly 40,000 people worldwide. When you think about that number, what does that stir up in you? Do you feel like relief? Do you feel responsibility? Do you feel grief? What does that number mean to you?
Oh, that's a great question. I feel an urgency because there's three of us on the team. All right. We're a very small team, and it's actually like 42,000 at this point. 42,000, 2 million interactions. The fourth highest utilization country is Saudi Arabia. I mean, we're absolutely global. Amy speaks in, 80 plus languages. There are 2 billion people alive right now who either are experiencing domestic violence, have in the past, which means they still bear the scars and need specialized support, or will. Okay, the 2 billion compared to the 40,000 that have talked to Amy, I feel an immense pressure to make sure that everyone knows that Amy exists.
Yes.
And because, 40,000 is hardly a dent. I also think 40,000 for a team of 3 is an impressive indicator of the opportunity that technology can play in this space, not to replace the folks who are already doing work in this space, but because there will never be enough people. There will never be enough support, and people deserve support before a crisis.
Absolutely. Okay, I want to talk about the different forms that domestic violence can take, right? Because sometimes when you hear domestic violence, people picture physical abuse. But survivors of domestic violence know that it can be so much broader than that, right? Can you break down the layers, especially, things like narcissistic abuse, coercive control, emotional abuse? Talk about those other forms of abuse that often go unseen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, a good health space analogy for this is if you're looking for bruises, you're looking for end stage physical, demonstrable, observable impacts of disease, right? Whereas there's all sorts of indicators, well prior to that. And I think probably the majority of abusive relationships will have little to no physical violence, which is part of how we know that it's really underrepresented in the numbers, because, the 1 in 3 is, have you experienced overt, physical sexual violence?
Right.
So you talk about narcissistic abuse, coercive control. These are examples where kind of in this space, we recognize the likelihood of low to no physical violence. Now, physical violence is one of many tools that abusers can use to secure privilege, right? Because domestic violence, abuse, coercive relationships is about power and control. I get to use, the perpetrator, get to use kind of my special sauce and skill set to coerce from you caretaking, the ability to decide what's for dinner tonight and what time it should be at, the ability to decide who you should hang out with and for how long, when we should have children, make major decisions, the financial decisions. I think that the best indicator, we certainly physical violence as kind of a crisis indicator, is in any of these, whether it's coercive control or narcissistic abuse or kind of the movie theater version of domestic violence, is just to ask, is it safe to disagree in your relationship? Anyone listening to this podcast, is it safe? And I don't mean necessarily physically, emotionally, psychologically, sexually, whatever. Is it safe to disagree? And I think that if you ask 10 people in a room that, a shockingly high percentage of people will say no. If I disagree, I'll be gaslit or stonewalled. He won't talk to me for days. I won't get that money for groceries this week. Or, last time this happened, he tore this thing up.
Wow.
Or he took my phone, or he demanded that I show him, who I'd been text messaging. Now, all of these are totally nonviolent.
Wow.
right? Is it safe to disagree?
Mm.
And asking that question of yourself, and certainly asking of someone else and watching them process that, I think is probably the best indicator of whether or not there's a power and control dynamic. If someone is willing to leverage power over someone else, there's always a risk that they will leverage it to the point of lethality. When we kind of wash over, non-physical forms of domestic abuse, we neglect to recognize that there's already a crowbar being used in that relationship.
Mm.
And it could only be a matter of time or a matter of environment or trigger to turn that crowbar, in something that's used to leverage someone emotionally in something that could harm them physically.
Wow. Is it safe to disagree? And I think that that is such an important question because it gets to the root of the issue. When things are going fine and it's dandy, there's no reason to grapple. But when there's a disagreement, that's truly when you see people's true nature come out, right? When there is a little bit of a friction. So asking that question truly hits the heart of the matter. So thank you for that. And I hope my listeners are paying attention to this, because disagreement can either bring a sense of anxiety, feelings of just discomfort, feeling unsafe, things like that. And I think those are indications of even microaggression, right? And feelings that you're not genuinely secure in this space. If having disagreements or having some sort of argument can stir up those emotions in you. Let's switch gears and talk about nurses, especially in clinical settings like a hospital. I know that abuse can show up in ways that are not always obvious. What can nurses be looking for? For nurses themselves who might be experiencing high rates of victimization, how can the nursing community begin to protect their own? So this question is twofold: nurses to patients that they serve, and nurses to nurses themselves.
Yeah. So people who are actively or historically have experienced domestic violence have higher healthcare utilization rates, right? Mm-hmm. We know that it increases, short and long-term physical health needs, mental health needs, and those all can interplay together. So we know that, of the patient population that a nurse is working with, they will be disproportionately representative of domestic violence survivors. And that will likely be really concealed unless the person is being treated for, the physical signs of domestic violence. That'll likely be concealed. It is, I think, really hard in a clinical setting to be able to suss out whether or not someone may be in the power down, position in their relationship, or higher risk for some escalation into physical violence. Mm-hmm. I'd actually be curious if a nurse asked that question that I just did. Does it feel safe to disagree in your relationship? What happens if you guys disagree when alone with the patient? If that would be revealing for that person. And, in the healthcare space, one of the places that Amy is very much trying to occupy is what happens after someone discloses, or no, it's not particularly safe. Is he out of the room right now? Because XYZ, if there isn't something that mandates reporting, for example, what do we have to offer? Offer survivors? We would love to be in that space. If you have some questions about this, talk about it at Amy Says, when we can take on the expertise in that load. But for, nurses themselves experience some of the highest rates of domestic violence victimization. And I could pontificate as to why I think that, domestic violence is, leverages people's caregiving tendencies in order to prioritize their own, privilege their own wishes to be caretaken. Yeah. So people in caretaking industries are going to be more likely to be victimized. We also know that nurses have, high rates of workplace violence as well. So there's probably some more normalization in that community. But for nurses who are curious about the health of their relationship or know that it is unhealthy, we would highly recommend having a simple, confidential, privileged conversation with Amy. It will be vastly illuminating, no doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I have just a couple more questions and then we will move on to our game time section. You're carrying such a heavy burden, people's emotional weight on your shoulder as well. How do you maintain your own joy? How do you protect your peace, even as you kind of carry others through their storms?
Gosh, when I was doing direct work with survivors and, the caseload of survivors navigating the family court system, it's incredibly difficult. It's easy to become enmeshed kind of in someone's experience when you're really close to it. One of the opportunities for Amy is that Amy doesn't get re-traumatized, right? Amy isn't triggered. Amy can handle that emotional burden without experiencing vicarious trauma. So I'm actually a lot more insulated now than I was. And of course, I get to feast on all of the incredible emails from people like, oh my gosh, I just, I won my case. I got my kids back. He finally got arrested, whatever. But, in my experience working directly with survivors, there's a really critical boundary about not attaching yourself to the decisions that the survivor makes. We might have really strong opinions about what they should do next. And as soon as we kind of take our horse to that, it can be quite an energy drain. So really kind of recognizing the independence and autonomy of the survivor really helps against that exhaustion.
Yeah, and this also can be a timely message to nurses who work in that field of domestic abuse and, child abuse, all kinds of things. And they are kind of the medium between the patient and the court system, or for any other child counselors who have to deal with the burden of this. Just knowing that there's a boundary line so that your peace and your own joy can be protected while you serve others. And my final question is, what sort of advice do you have for someone, a nurse, a survivor, an advocate who feels called to be part of the solution, but doesn't know where to start? What is one step that they can take today?
I love that. People are really reticent around any type of disclosure. Like there's lots of disclosure testing. The ways that advocates, people who care, people who want to apply kind of the evidence and science of domestic violence advocacy to the real world, one of the most powerful things that you can do is just indicate your receptiveness, your openness, that you're not going to gaslight them, that you're not going to victim blame them, that you're not going to minimize their experience. I think that takes either experience being a discloser or direct training.
Yeah.
But there are a billion missed opportunities to kind of catch someone in a difficult moment that are created by the survivor not knowing that it would be a safe place to make a disclosure. And certainly in a healthcare setting where someone might be a mandatory reporter, there could be some additional risks.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So the website is Amy Says, right? And before we close, I will give you a chance to kind of talk about where people can connect with you. But we are going to play our game, of course. So you know the rules of the game. I'm going to shake my jar, pick out a category, and you have to come up with a storyline. Well, you're not a nurse, but because it's Nurse on Purpose, I'm going to make the main character still a nurse. And you can give us kind of your storyline for what kind of show you might want to see. Okay, so let's do it. Here we go. I hope I don't pick drama or something, because... Okay. Yours is CSI Crime.
Okay.
Still a drama.
CSI Crime. Okay. So we're opening on a scene where there is a woman alone. She's being treated. She's in a treatment room, and the nurse is asking questions. And you can see the nurse is thinking, I think that there is a background of domestic violence here. I think
let's weave it in.
Right? I think some injuries are maybe being misrepresented. The survivors will misrepresent those things for their own safety. And also maybe that this person is trying to send me a sign as safely as possible, but is really kind of riding the fence. And I could imagine like a series where this woman's particularly good at sussing out some of those hidden indicators of domestic violence. But then she starts to realize that she is experiencing some of those same things in her own relationship. So here, all of this focus that she's put into, working with patients and identifying the things that other people might miss. She's very she's totally house styling this thing, only to realize, wait a minute, they are happening to me and I didn't even know it. So kind of the terrifying discovery of her unraveling her own relationship and realizing that maybe the problem is actually inside the house.
Oh, I love this. That That was awesome. Wow, I didn't see that twist coming. But it's so true because sometimes we encounter people and through them we can kind of see our lives mirrored back to us. And so that's an amazing storyline. Thank you for sharing that. All right, can you tell people where they can find you real quick and connect with Amy Says?
Yeah, so Amy is spelled AIMEE, amysays.com, and any of the support or contact links on there end up directly in my inbox. I'd love to talk to anyone. We want to have all of the conversations show up in places where Amy is needed, and of course, any direct questions, comments, etc. about Amy, I'm happy to answer those as well.
Awesome. And thank you so much for just sharing your mission with us, with clarity and with courage, and just reminding us that safety is a human right, not a privilege, and that technology, when guided by compassion, can be a lifeline. We don't need to be afraid of AI. We can use it to our benefit. And so every listener, let this conversation be a reminder that you deserve safety, you deserve dignity, you deserve support, whether you're caring for survivors, whether you are walking beside someone that you love or healing from your own experience, there is always help, there is hope, and remember that you are not alone. So guys, until next time, keep learning, keep serving, and keep living a life of purpose. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks for hanging with me till the end. I hope you gained some valuable insight into the world of nursing. If today's episode inspired you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs to hear about the amazing work nurses are doing. Let's keep breaking stereotypes and reshaping the narrative together. I'll see you next time.